What it do, y'all, and welcome back to my channel. For today's video in Swagmas, I thought we should go ahead and talk about the last push of eyeshadow palettes that I was able to test out and finalize my opinions on. This is probably going to be the biggest quantity of palettes that I've had all year. You'll really see in just a second. Honestly, I haven't even taken the time to count, but in this category, I'm going to talk about any palette that has two or more shadows. So some of these are going to be the little duos that I got towards the end of this year. So a lot of palettes. Pretty much I have my opinions on all of the palettes that I've featured now this whole year. So this is going to be the last push between all of these holiday palettes and any others that have just been staggered after my last palette roundup, which was quite some time ago. So you're really going to get a lot of opinions in here. And then if all goes well, I plan to film right after this my last roundup of products so that you guys can get all of these last kind of push items out of the way right before you kind of truly finalize Christmas shopping if you are somebody like me who buys the Christmas gifts quite last minute. So that's all I got for you guys. Of course, that was an intro. If you're wondering what's going on with my makeup look, I did not record it once again, but I will have all of the items listed and linked down below. Pretty much it's really what I've been wearing this last month, just a different blush. That's pretty much it, really. So yeah, let's just go ahead and dive on in. There's quite a lot of palettes to talk about. And of course, we're going to be talking about my opinions on each palette. And then subsequently later, we're going to be doing our ranking. So let's get into it. Alrighty, like I said, there is a lot of palettes in front of me, so I'm just gonna dive right on in and let's just get the kind of most viral of all of these palettes out of the way. And this is the Patrick Ta Eyeshadow Duo, and I have it in Talk to My Team. As of yet, I have not picked up any additional shades, but I am still very interested in additional shades. It's just that I've been overwhelmed lately and I just did not want to bring any more products into my collection. But what I will say is, to me, this is a beautiful kind of topper and accent palette. If you are somebody who likes to just have shimmers and you already have enough mattes, if that's not the case, and you're somebody like me who has definitely gotten more into using cream shadows as a base, I think that this is a beautiful accent on top. Is this product actually necessary for anybody's collection? Absolutely not. Any of these products that I'm going to be talking about are not necessary for anybody's collection. These are just items that I decided to spend my money on, and because I was interested in trying them out. That said, once again, with this particular palette, because it is so expensive, coming in at, I believe, $42 for just these two eyeshadows, many people have done videos giving you guys recommendations for cheaper alternatives or just dupes in general. So if you are interested in a cheaper or more financially responsible choice, definitely scout those out. Honestly, I just don't have the time to do that, or maybe I would have, but I still think that this is absolutely a stunning palette. Between the two shades, I do get more use out of this top shade. It's like has a more kind of definitive transition from like a warmer red to a true gold. It's an absolutely stunning shade. And like I said, there are two other duos that I am personally interested in picking up. I don't know if and when I will ever pick them up because I've really started to knuckle down on what I'm willing and able to purchase as of December. And I've not really spoken on that, just mainly because it's a personal decision. I will probably speak on it after Swagmas. I just kind of want to get through all of the video content that I had in mind, but I'm on a rampage per usual. I'm very excited and happy that I picked that up. I love the product for me and how I use it. And if you are interested in it and you have similar usage for eyeshadow as I do, where you've been doing a lot more subtle, kind of very easy, quick looks, I definitely think that is one that you can look into. Let's get all of these like duo shadow palettes out of the way. The next one I want to talk about is from Bobbi Brown, and this one is the Gilded Gleam Eyeshadow Duo. And I did not say, but if I have any swatches saved for any of these palettes, I will have them across the screen for you guys. As for this duo actually came in a set where you got an eyeliner and a mascara for, I think it retailed for something in the 30s, like $36, if memory serves me correctly. And I will say I did just pick up this duo or this set just for this. Thankfully, I was able to get it on sale, which was nice. This duo is a lot more metallic in nature, so you're going to get a lot more of an opaque finish and actual application compared to the Patrick Ta, which is a lot more sparkly, kind of iridescent finish, if you will. That said, once I put these on the eyes, these actually appear a lot closer in appearance than I expected. They're both neutral tones for my skin tone, which is why I picked them up, because I've really been into neutral tones. There are days here and there where I've really gotten into color. But if we're being honest, day-to-day makeup that I've actually applied, whether it's sitting in this chair or actually leaving to hang out with friends, it has been a neutral beat similar to this makeup application that I have on my face. So I definitely think that this duo will get a lot of use in my collection, and it has a very familiar formula with this metallic finish. Would I say this is something super like unique and extravagant? Honestly, no. I think that this duo is pretty standard and something that I could have probably depotted two shadows that I already had and put it in a duo similar, but I wanted to try it. I have tried Bobbi Brown eyeshadows very early on in my makeup career, or knowledge, whatever you want to call it, but I hadn't really tried them since, and that was two shadows that I was actually interested in, so I decided to pick them up, and I'm happy I picked them up. Will I pick up any more? Probably not. I think that will curb that interest, but who knows? Maybe next year they'll come out with even better shades for me, and I'll just have to pick them up. I believe the last duo that I have to talk to you guys about is this Pat McGrath Labs duo, and this is in the Patelic Passion Duo. Once again, this is their more neutral duo that they came out again for the holiday season, and I honestly did not want to pick this up. When I saw the prices, when I talked about this in my new makeup releases, I told you guys it ain't gonna happen. It's really not. But I was so intrigued from the main Pat McGrath palette, which I'll be talking about in just a second. And the fact that I was able to get this at Ulta along with that, I decided to go ahead and pick it up because I knew I was going to be doing a video for you guys, and I was truly interested. This is the first time I do believe that she's done duos like this. She also had 5 pans, which I did not pick up because they were not available at Ulta or Sephora. They were only available at the website, Pat McGrath's website, of course. But regardless, this is a very creamy formula. Creamy, and it is a metallic with sparkles in it. So it's kind of honestly a combination of the two formulations that I've talked about previously. It has that metallic opaque formulation like the Bobbi Brown, but it has the shimmer iridescent that the Patrick Ta does. That said, it's not nearly as iridescent and shimmery as the Patrick Ta, but it still brings something to the table that I love. And like I said, this formula here is extremely creamy. I'll be hopefully remembering to talk about that when we get to the actual full size Pat McGrath holiday palette this year, but it was a unique formula that I was extremely impressed with and extremely amazed that she came up with this, in the sense that my previous formulations that I've tried from Pat McGrath eyeshadow formulation wise have not been nearly as creamy. That said, this is the first year I actually picked up anything from her holiday collections that were eyeshadow related. I usually stick to her beautiful, beautiful highlighters, which I still have the highlighters on my desk so I can show you. These highlighters that have this like baked chalet formula, oh my gosh, she needs to come out with these again. She needs to come out with these again. And I will actually, if I have the time, be filming a video around something similar concept wise to that, because there are certain brands that just come out with things for holidays or for collaborations, and those need to be permanent formulas in your range because they're so good. They're so good. Anyways, keeping it going, I feel like today I'm going to keep going with like the small palettes and then try to gradually get bigger and bigger as we go. If it's not correctly perfect, that's okay. The next one I want to talk about is actually a brand that I wanted to do my next deep dive in, and this is Lisa Eldridge. The palette's name is Fawn, and this was her most recent palette that she actually came out with, and she touted that this was like a natural or neutral brown palette, and that's why I decided to pull the trigger between that. And she also came out with liquid eyeshadows, and if you know me right now, liquid eyeshadows or just eyeshadow bases have just been my bread and butter, more so than like the more traditional clear eyeshadow bases. So I really deep dove into that, and I haven't given you guys that video yet. I apologize. It's coming. Eventually it will be coming. But anyways, when it comes to this eyeshadow palette, I will say I definitely prefer the mattes over the shimmers. To me, these shimmers are very, very basic. Very basic. She does have a like sparkly shimmer right here, which I do truly appreciate. These two I find are even flatter than some of my normal kind of metallics that I get enjoyment out of. I will say that this shade actually is like a duochrome type shade. If I'm looking at it here, it's a gold. But if I'm looking at it in the viewfinder and in my mirror, it's like a redder tone. So I do appreciate that she has some intrigue in the palette. And these mattes are like a creamy matte to powder type situation. They're not a true kind of traditional matte, which is why I truly enjoy these mattes. But I will say I was personally disappointed in the formulation that I found in the shimmers. That said, I'm very much a avid member, even when I do a very neutral look like this. And today I didn't put a shimmer on, but I'll usually put a shimmer on like in the inner corner and blend it into the actual main portion of my eye. I will still do something that is quite sparkly, very reminiscent to the Patrick Ta or even like the Pat McGrath and of course the Bobbi Brown. So those are kind of some of the formulas that she's kind of competing against in my head. And although I think that the matte formula is absolutely stunning, I don't know if I would wholeheartedly recommend this palette for the price. But we will get into the price breakdown for that particular palette and like would I recommend it in any of the other products from her range when I finally do that wrap up video. It has been quite some time, but we will get to it eventually. I have two kind of 9 pans that I want to talk about. So let's get through the holiday 9 pan first. This is the Charlotte Tilbury 9 pan for the year, and this is the Love palette. This is the one that she came out for holiday 2024. And once again, I'd never tried Charlotte Tilbury's formula, and I was just very, very intrigued. I heard a lot of really interesting things, discourse when it comes to her like creamy formula, specifically in this type of packaging, and the previous formula in last year's packaging just like this. I believe they have the same formulation, and that's why I picked this one up, also because this one was cheaper, so there is that. But in this one we have 5 mattes and 4 shimmers, and I will say I am thoroughly impressed. I will just say once again that I do believe that even though they said these 3 on the bottom are the same formula, I believe it's this one and these 2 that are the same formula, and this one that is the oddball out in the shimmers. That said, I enjoy all these formulas. I enjoy all of the colors. It really gives a subtle pink tinge, something very homebred that Charlotte Tilbury does a lot. If you've tried any of her Orgasm, even the Love is a Drug, the what is the one? There's the one where it's like you were out last night, Walk of No Shame. All of those formulas, right? All of those colors, they're very much this like pinkyish neutral situation where it can work for a neutral, but it can also be built up to be a true pigmented pink and or red, because the Walk of No Shame is a little bit more on the red spectrum than pink. But regardless, I actually really like this formula, and had I had it my way and things worked out, I would have actually picked up another palette from her this year. She has a 6 pan of just straight up matte neutrals that apparently has the same matte formula as is in this palette, and I loved this matte formula. This is very reminiscent to me of the original Natasha Denona cream to powder formula, except I would say that those mattes are actually creamier. They are quite creamy, and if you're using a natural hair brush, I don't think you would have a problem with it, but the color and the shadow might get a little stuck in those bristles, so you might find that you actually have to wash or clean those bristles a little bit more regularly if you're actively and continuously using this type of formula again and again every day. But still, fantastic formula. I really loved it. And yeah, I got a lot of enjoyment by testing it out, and I cannot wait to continue using it in the future. The next palette is from Half Cake. This is one of the brands this year that I did a deep dive in. And when we're looking at this palette, it looks very basic, and it is, right? You have the basic kind of more traditional mattes. There's no real active creaminess to them, although they are quite pigmented and blendable, so there's nothing wrong with that. And then you have the more traditional metallics, very similar to what I would say like the Bobbi brown metallics are. It's very much on that same note, similar to like a Sydney Grace metallics, something like that, where you're gonna get that opacity, you're gonna get that pigment. You're going to get a subtle shine or sheen to your eye, but you're not going to get anything outlandish, right? You're not going to have any sparkles here. It's not going to have any form of duochrominess or anything like that. I think this is a nice basic palette. Is this something that would truly stand out in my collection personally? Probably not. But I'm honestly very happy that this had such great quality. I felt like, honestly, and you will see this in the Roundup video that I did for Half Caked, I feel like that palette was one of the better things that I tried from the brand overall. Everything else I pretty much have already decluttered and or plan to declutter. I feel like that's the one product that actually could potentially stand the test of time in my collection. Will it? Who knows? At the time of me filming this, I haven't filmed my palette declutter. I haven't even filmed my lip declutter yet, and that's going to be a chore in itself. But nonetheless, I think that that will still stand at least a little bit more wholeheartedly in my collection, and I won't feel the need to like chuck it across the room as I have felt with, unfortunately, all the other products that I picked up from Half Cake. Alrighty, I didn't realize there is another 9-pan that I actually picked up, and I believe I've only shown this on my channel maybe once. I can't distinctly remember what video. I will try to link and list any respective videos for these products down below for you guys as well. But this is the Lethal Cosmetics Avatar Last Bender, and this is the Earth palette, hence the green and the brown. This palette, wow. I have not had the best experience with Lethal Cosmetics. I said lethal, is that right? Yeah, that's right. I have not had the best experience with Lethal Cosmetics eyeshadow in the past. For me, they just never worked out for me. I didn't like their singles, and I believe I had either built a palette or I bought one of their pre-made palettes, and I didn't particularly like that either. I've had some of their cheek products here and there, and they were fine, nothing great. This is a gem. This is a gem among the rest of their products, in my opinion. The metallics are not just straight up metallics. They're foiled, they're shimmery, they're delicious. These two, excuse me, these two are the best of the two in this palette. These two are a little bit more traditional. They still have a shimmer to them, but they're not as foiled as these two are. Absolutely stunning. You guys will see it in the swatches, because when I did swatches on this palette, I gasped. I audibly gasped because I was not expecting to enjoy this palette, honestly, as much as I did just from the swatching alone. Then we have the mattes. These mattes are pigmented, blendable, fantastic. Honestly, this is the best experience that I've had from Lethal Cosmetics, and I've tried them here and there throughout my makeup journey. So I'm so happy that I decided to go ahead and pick this up. I did also get one of their makeup pouches. I'm so excited that I have that pouch. I actually need to move it to another section in this desk so I actually remember to use it. But regardless, I think that this was definitely worth the splurge. I was not expecting to pick that up the month that I did, and I really didn't have time to actually showcase it on my channel. At that point, by the time I got it, you know, it was old news. People had already gone past it 10 times over, but I was really happy to have tested it out. And I might have used it in a new makeup releases that I did as a live. Not fairly confident, but I may have. I think the next palette we're going to talk about right now is this one. This is from Glamlite. And this is one of the newer palettes that I've actually featured on my channel. This is the Trick or Treat palette. I've used this a handful of times, and because of that, and then also my knowledge of Glamlite's formula, I feel very confident kind of already reviewing this fully for you guys. So there's a full row of mattes. You have 5 mattes and 5 shimmers. Now I will say every palette is different when it comes to Glamlite. You can really never definitively say this is going to be a good palette because it's coming from Glamlite, because they have different formulas. I will say, to me, this is actually their good formula. Now these shimmers are not necessarily creamy. I would say they are a drier shimmer, but there is a nice amount of sparkle running throughout these that it really works. I would definitely not classify these as metallics. I wouldn't say you necessarily can get like a one swipe opacity with them. Can you build it up? Yes. But I will say, for me, it's not as creamy as I would have loved. I would have loved for these to be a little bit creamier, very similar to the 2 shimmers here in this Avatar palette. But regardless, this is a really good palette. I love the range in the mattes, and I love the range in the shimmers. It's really, really nice. This is gonna probably one of the 2 palettes that I keep from Glamlite. I think I only have one now. I can easily see me keeping that palette in my declutter because I'm really enjoying it. And I think out of all of the palettes that I've tried from Glamlite, that is actually some really good quality from the brand. Very old palette that I've already featured multiple times, I believe, on my channel is the Solmane 2 palette from Odens Eye. I never got around to adding this in a palette roundup because that's how few palettes at the beginning of this year I really purchased. But here we are. I did purchase this, and I will say, for me, the formula is great. Okay, I personally never had any bad experience when it comes to Odens Eye's palette formulation. But I don't necessarily think I should have picked this up. I don't think that this color scheme is really me. It's not something that I get a lot of use out of. Purples used to be a neutral for me, not necessarily anymore. Blues have never really been a neutral for me. I've gone out of my, my little bubble to experience them, but at the end of the day, blues have never been really easy for me to pull off, in my opinion. Now, I want to say I absolutely adored the couple of looks that I showed on my channel with this palette, and you can easily get some neutral looks if you just go down this diagonal and pop this on your eye. It'll look pretty neutral in the grand scheme of things, but I just don't know if this was a palette I should have picked up. I think what I wanted to immediately pick up was the highlighters and the blushes they had in that range. And I just decided to throw the palette in to do a full-on review. And, I'm learning more about myself that, sometimes it's okay not to get everything to do a full-on review, and just get the things that you actually want and you'll actually keep long-term, or think you're going to keep long-term. I think everything else is left is like a bigger palette, so we're just gonna run straight through this stack. And the first one is from Fantasy Cosmetics and Cosmetica, and this is the Harvest of Souls palette. So this is the very last palette that I've tested out in 2024. I will not be testing out any other palettes in 2024. And I must say, this palette speaks to me on a level that I truly did not expect. I have used it multiple times now, both on camera and off camera, and this is fantastic quality. I would say I feel like this is even better quality than the previous Fantasy Cosmetica palette that I had. I don't know if they changed their formulations. I don't really have that big of a relation. I have no relationship. I don't have a relationship with the owner, and I don't think I've heard any YouTuber that does have a relationship with the owner really speak on that. But I must say, this palette is stunning, absolutely stunning. I have done, of course, the swatches, I do believe, for this palette, but I have also taken the time to do that tutorial, which is one of my most recent tutorials with new makeup releases or new makeup. Once again, it will be linked down below with the link for this particular palette. I absolutely love that palette. And that palette, like I said, truly reminded me that I can enjoy color. Maybe not as much as I did in the beginning of my channel, because at the beginning of my channel, I had color everywhere, all over my face. It was on my eyes, it was on my cheeks, it was on my lips. I had color everywhere. And that was me expressing myself, and I don't find any regret in those videos, in that content, any of it. But I definitely do find that as I've gotten older, I've kind of veered away from it naturally, and I like that this palette reminded me that I can still do color in my own way. So yeah. Cosmic brushes. So they came out with their Undergrowth palette, and this screamed me, in my opinion. If you know me, greens have really become a neutral color for me. And then of course they have browns. I absolutely loved this palette. Great formula, great color scheme, all of that jazz. For me, if I had to say, like, is this my favorite from the brand? I don't think this would be my favorite personally, but it's a really good palette. I love that they have these like multi-chromes that are really, really metallic. I love the different formulations there. They have the metallics that have shimmer. They have metallics that are a little bit more basic. They have just the shimmery ones that are a little bit more like toppers. And then they have all their mattes. Their mattes are creamy, but not in like a cream to powder type way. They're a creamy powder matte formulation, and they're great. I know some people think they're a little bit too hyped up. I definitely think they are worth the hype. My biggest issue with the brand is that the palettes are like $20, and then after you put on your shipping to the US or wherever you are outside of the UK, because I don't live there, so I don't know, it's like almost $50 for your package. And so that is just, it hurts. It hurts every time. Granted, I spent $50 on palettes left and right, but to see that much in shipping and taxes and all of that, that's where it hurts. It hurts. Okay, I'm finally at the Pat McGrath Holiday palette that I wanted to talk to you guys about. And this is, like I said, the first holiday palette that I decided to pick up for Pat McGrath. And what I will say, similar to, like I said, the duo that I talked about earlier, this is the only creamy metallic. I don't know why she only put one of those in there, because that is the formula that I think really could have brought this palette to an even higher level. I think that this palette is actually really quite nice. I love the mattes. The mattes do remind me of the 5-pan. Have I ever had a 5-pan? The 6-pans, that's what it was. I had 6-pans that I don't think I have anymore, oh, those were holiday releases. I forgot about those. Anyways, I had some of the 6-pans, and these mattes remind me of those. Obviously not like the motherships, because the motherships are a whole different bread and butter, but this reminds me of a similar formula. And then she has a lot of metallics that are straight up metallics, and then metallics with those shimmers. So you really get a variety here. And this darker shade, to me, can go between a satin or a matte. I really honestly still cannot tell which one it is. I think all of the mattes in here have a subtle sheen to it, so that if you want it to act more as a satin, you could probably finesse it that way. But if you blend it out nicely, and they do blend out beautifully, you won't have a problem with them appearing as a matte, if that makes sense. Overall, I'm really happy with this holiday collection. I think that out of the holiday collections that I have picked up in the past, now that I remember that I did pick up those 6-pans, this would be the holiday collection that actually stands the test of time and is actually used. The other ones I kept because they were Pat McGrath, but these I'll keep because I actually like them, and I hope to get a lot of use out of them. Adept Cosmetics has come out with a lot this year, and in previous years I reviewed, did 3 looks from palettes. I did a lot with their palettes, but this year this was the only one that really tickled my fancy. So this is the Unity palette, and as typical for Adept, they have a row of mattes, so only 5 mattes, and then 10 shimmers. The shimmers of course have a combination of metallics with shimmer, just shimmery toppers, the whole gamut. And that's what really makes Adept known, and why they can charge the prices that they charge, because their palettes are quite expensive, but they're fantastic quality. These mattes, once again, are a drier formula. They're not a very creamy matte, but they're extremely pigmented and extremely blendable. One thing about all of these products, I really have been very good at making sure that the actual formulas are going to be good. And that will make my ranking very hard in just a second, but I have two more palettes to talk about. But let me finish with the Adept Unity palette. I think this is a really, really solid, colorful palette for them. They don't do a lot of colorful palettes that are extended in this size, although I think they just came out with one recently that I decided to pass on because it just was not my cup of tea. But overall, really happy to have added that to my Adept collection. I have got quite a collection now, and I just can't wait to use them all in the future. So the last two palettes are actually from the exact same brand, and they are both from Lunar Beauty. So about, I think, the same month, if not the month after I moved to this apartment, I decided to pick up from Lunar Beauty. I believe they were doing some form of sale, and I already wanted to get another one of their lip oils. Their lip oil formula is one of my absolute favorite lip oil formulas, period, the end. And so I decided to pick that up, but I also wanted to pick up these two palettes that I kind of always wanted, but I could just never justify picking up. So this one is the Mushroom or the Moonshroom palette. And this is a beautiful, beautiful neutral with a twist palette. I absolutely love it. The twist is like this kind of purpley tone that they have randomly thrown throughout the palette, but this palette is fantastic. I know my last experience with Lunar Beauty was not the best. I found that the mattes, I think, were either pressed too tight or something. I really don't know what happened with that palette, but it just didn't work for me, and I was devastated. The color scheme was absolutely stunning, and I really wanted to get use out of it, but I just could not. Anyways, though, this palette is beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. I get use out of all of these shades. There's not one that's too light that doesn't show up on my skin tone. And the shimmers have always been a favorite of mine. These shimmers, once again, run the gamut of being, almost all of them are pretty much the metallics with a slight shimmer in there. There's really not any true toppers. If you wanted to say a topper, I would say this one might be a topper, but I think it has a little bit too much pigment for it to be a true topper. And this one over here is like a true kind of metallic, but otherwise they're all kind of that same formula. Absolutely love the formulas from Lunar Beauty, and I'm just really happy that that palette actually works for me. The next one that I picked up is actually the collaboration that he did with Laura Lee, and yeah. Anyways, I really like the color scheme. Once again, it was a neutral palette, and I was drawn to it. Once again, this is actual palette that will work for me. I tried the whole gamut of the light shades to the darker shades, both mattes and shimmers, and they show up on my skin tone. That's all I want. Even if they look a little chalky or ashy or whatever, that's fine. I understand that, because like I'm not going to be putting this shade in my crease. I think my camera is washing it out, but this is a straight up cream. I'm not going to be putting that in my crease, right? But the concept that those shades didn't show up in the previous ones were devastating. But either way, this is a really pretty palette, absolutely stunning. You get a variety of different kind of neutrals depending on what you consider a neutral. You get some purples, you get some browns, you get some greens. Very, very fun palette. I don't really follow either influencer, but I do follow Lunar Beauty's brand, not Manny MUA himself, but really enjoy those palettes nonetheless. So I have quite the collection that I need to decide what's going to be on top and bottom. As always, I'm going to divide them into two different categories, one for the bottom half, one for the top half, and I will of course show you guys the ranking. Once I get to the ranking portion of today's video, I'm just going to be pretty much doing a rapid fire explaining why it's in its spot and going to the next. I've already kind of given you guys hopefully a good thorough review on these products. Like I said, I think now twice, I will make sure to link all of these palettes down below in any videos that I have showcasing them. That way you can see them on my complexion. I think the only one that I may not have a video on up right now is the Lisa Eldridge, and I do apologize. I've not been able to get that up, so bear with me on that, but it will be coming. And when it comes, if it matters, I will go ahead and link it, hopefully as long as I remember, down in this description box. So let me step away, let me get these things ranked, and then I'll come back so you guys can know what the ranking is. I'm excited to see what it's going to be myself. Okay, I just took the time to count and I have 15 palettes. You don't know how happy I am that I actually had a kind of round number. It's not technically a round number, but you know what I mean, like a nice number. It would have been really annoying if I had a roundup with like 14 palettes. Anyways, though, let's dive into number 15. Before I do that, I will say all of these formulas are actually really, really good. So even though something may be in the 15th place or the first place, that does not mean that one formula is terrible and one formula is great. It is more an opinion on myself and how likely I think I'm going to reach for the palette, how I enjoy the color scheme, all the variety of different formulas, all of that jazz. So let's dive on in. Coming in at number 15 is unfortunately the half-caked perfect match palette. I will say, like I said, this is one of my favorite products that I tried from the brand, but overall it has very, very basic formulations, nothing really to write home about, and a lot of these palettes have something intriguing in their formulations, and so it just didn't really meet up to the next expectation. Coming in at number 14, and I'm gonna stop doing the ranking because I always forget, I'll just have her on the screen. Bobbi Brown. This Bobbi Brown duo in the Gilded Gleam duo, I was really expecting to have sparkly goodness, even uber metallic goodness. I didn't really get that. I kind of got some basic shimmers, not mad at it at any point. I definitely am happy that I picked it up. I think it's a cute little duo and I think I can easily travel with that and just throw them on my lid, blend out the edges and go about my business. But at the end of the day, once again, it just could not go up any higher. Next is unfortunately the Solmane 2 palette, and once again this has nothing to do with the formulation. I think this is actually their normal fantastic formulation. I think this is just a product of why did I pick up this palette. This palette really doesn't scream me. Maybe at the time when I picked it up I was truly very much excited, but I don't distinctly remember that, and as we can see the test of time, this has only been a couple of months and I'm not really checking for this color scheme. I don't really find myself excited for any, you know, crazy different quantity of color schemes that I'm going to be using for my eyes. Maybe this trio here, but otherwise I'm quite bored and nulled. I will keep it, don't get me wrong, but it's not something that I'm like excited to play with tomorrow. Very similar vein with this one is the Adept Cosmetics Unity palette. I pretty much opened this and I was like, oh, this wasn't what I was expecting. I don't know if I just didn't have really good stills when I was checking for actually picking this up, but if memory serves me correctly, I thought that there was more neutrals in this bottom row and clearly there are not. These are more purpley tones and this is a true like blurple types, not blurple, brown purple, whatever that color is, and then a green and this like very muted kind of lavender, and then of course the colorful metallics. I knew the colorful metallics were going to be there, and I can get with the colorful metallic as long as I have a matte a neutral crease. I can use it more consistently, and yeah, I was just disappointed. Who the disappointment should have fallen, who knows? But long story short, that's why it unfortunately made it into that spot. Next, I have the Glamlite Trick or Treat palette. I think this palette, once again, is one of the best that I've tried from Glamlite, but there's nothing really exciting about the formula, right? Yes, it's the best from their brand, but it's a basic palette. It's a basic neutral palette that I will love and adore and get use out of, don't get me wrong, but I don't see how there's anything even extravagant or slightly unique about any of those formulas for me. Next, I had to give it to the Lisa Eldridge Fawn palette. I really love the matte formula in here, and that's what really got this as high up as it did, because I was slightly disappointed in that shimmer, at least in these two shimmers. This one's really, really pretty. Like I said, I will be doing a more in-depth kind of opinion on this particular palette when I can finally sit down, honestly pick up what I wanted to pick up, and then ultimately do my final review on said products. I just have not done it. Maybe I'll do it right after this video so I can do it soon. But anyways, that's why that palette made it into that spot. The Fool's Fantasy palette, which is the collaboration between Lunar Beauty and Laura Lee Los Angeles. Although a very beautiful palette, once again, it does have some colors that I don't see as neutrals. And so even though I was really excited for this palette, and I still very much so am, I don't think that I will get much more use out of this than any of the palettes above it. I think that this bottom row is going to be my bread and butter, and even this top row. Some of these shades in the middle though, maybe not so much. And so for that, I could not ultimately give it any higher of a spot. I loved the variety and textures though, which is why it got as high as it did. Pat McGrath's palette, where we do have some interesting textures, namely this one, along with her unique mattes and the variety of colors. There's just something about this palette. I don't actually know what it is about this palette that made me want to pull the trigger. I usually don't pick up these palettes at all, but there was just something about this, and the fact that a lot of these metallics, even though they are metallic, have a decent amount of shimmer in here running throughout. You really get a variety of different textures here, color schemes, colors, all of the gambit, and for that reason it was able to really jump up in the spot. And at the last spot in the bottom half of this category, we have the Cosmic Brushes Undergrowth palette. This is honestly a true, I don't want to say fall from grace, but a true fall from grace for this brand in my rankings. They're usually one of the top 2 palettes, but when I'm looking at this palette, although I think that this is a beautiful palette and I would get a lot of use out of it, there's very much just one color scheme that I can think of, right? Because there really is only one color. It's a very extended range of greens. And so for me, when I like to look at a palette, I want to know that I can look at it and immediately think of 4 or 5 different eyeshadow looks that I can do immediately. And I really can't think of that because my eyes go to the same shades. And I've used this palette and I know that even though the shades may appear different, ultimately the way that I apply them, they all come out to be pretty much the same look. So that's why it had to go here, not for its quality, not for its color range in the sense that I don't like it, but in the sense that for me, I always make it look pretty much the same eyeshadow look. So now we have the top 6 and let's dive on in, shall we? Coming in at number 6 is the Lunar Beauty Moonshroom palette. Between the 2 palettes that I picked up from them at the exact same time, I think that this one will get a lot more use. It has that variety of textures, both mattes and shimmers. It has a wide range of mattes, which if you know me is my bread and butter. If you give me a good matte, I will justify a crappy shimmer in a heartbeat. And so for this, I absolutely love it. I love the different textures, and yeah, I'm just really excited to play with this more. Once I can get it out of this desk, I'll actually be able to play with it because I'll actually see it. Next, for the 5th spot, is actually this Pat McGrath little duo. I really love this duo, I must say. This has done a lot of good things. I've taken this traveling with me, and what I will do is just put my cream base on, tap these over the eyes. Sometimes I'll use them both, sometimes I'll use one. They're both stunning shades, and so there's nothing bad about this palette at all. It works for the way that I've been applying makeup lately, and so for that reason, it really got to jump up quite high. Coming in as number 4, and it just missed out on the top 3, which I of course will be stopping so you guys can guess in the comments if you want, is the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk Beautyverse Love palette. I know a lot of people think that this palette is overpriced, it's not worth it, blah blah blah. Your opinions are completely valid, but I absolutely love this palette. I've gotten so much use out of it. Once again, I traveled with it, and the one time that I traveled, I actually ran out of my brow product, and I actually ended up putting this in my brows, and it worked. Did it look the best on my eye, to my eye? No, but it worked. And so for me, these creamy mattes are absolutely stunning. The shimmers are beautiful as well. Absolutely, I love that palette, and I cannot wait to try more palettes from Charlotte Tilbury with a similar formulation. So now I have the top 3, and we're gonna go ahead and list off those palettes for you. I have the Patrick Ta Eyeshadow Duo, the Avatar Last Airbender palette, and then of course the Fantasy Cosmetics Harvest of Souls palette. So I'm gonna go ahead and wait for just a hot second, and we're gonna jazz it out. We're gonna dance, dance party, dance party, dance party. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Did you put your comment down? Did you? Okay. If you didn't, I gave you your shot. Coming in at number 3 is the Avatar The Last Airbender palette from Lethal Cosmetics. I am thoroughly impressed with this palette, not only for the mattes, but the shimmers. I mean, this is truly beautiful. Not only do I see multiple looks with this palette, but I just am excited to play with this palette. And that is something that I can't say for all of the other palettes later on, especially in that bottom half. Absolutely stunning. This shade is so, it's like flaky, but in the best possible way. You do need to be careful because it will flake all over your face. It's done it to me. But if you get it on your eyes, flawless. Absolutely flawless. Coming in at number 2, I'm actually going to be giving it to the Eyeshadow Duo. I really have been enjoying this duo. When I tell you I'll put on a look like this, and honestly I may put this shadow on before I go to work because I probably won't be going to sleep anytime soon before work. I'll just dust it on the inner corner and lightly blend it, and it just works for my kind of everyday routine right now. It's an absolutely stunning duo. Do I think you need to spend $42 for an eyeshadow duo to get the same effect? Absolutely not. Can you get eyeshadows from any palette that you have and do the same effect? Absolutely. But because I have this, and because this has a very unique kind of topper finish that's very sparkly, I'm going to use it and I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm glad I am. You could also use a highlighter also if you did not think about that. Like, this is the highlighter I used today. It's the Fantasia collaboration with One Size. You can throw that on your eyeshadow and it works, especially if you have very sparkly highlighter. Absolutely works. Don't sleep on that. But anyways, I have this, and so sis finna use it. She finna use it. The last, but certainly not least, eyeshadow palette that I wanted to discuss is, of course, the Harvest of Souls from Fantasy Cosmetica. There's just something about this palette that really just speaks to me. Now, I may be a little bit biased because this was quite literally the last palette that I reviewed prior to sitting down to do this video, but I don't think so. I think that this has just really brought in a breath of fresh air for me when it comes to using color in a distinctly unique way for me. I mean, like I said in my demo, I see so many different looks, not only in the quads that it's clearly grouped in, but you can also do the quads in the middle and the outside as well. I mean, there's so many different ways I can see myself using this palette, and I've already begun to do it, and I just cannot wait to continue using this palette even more. So that is why this had to get number 1. I find that out of all of these palettes, this is the one that I see most versatility in, and although it's a lot of color, I can see like 4 and 10 looks easily just by looking at this palette. So that's why I had to give it the number 1 spot. I would love to know, I can't wait to read you guys' comments to see who guessed right, who guessed wrong, etc, 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 but it's all good. I'm just happy if you did participate in our little game that you did participate. So that is the end for today's palette roundup. If all things go according to plan, next week I will be doing the roundup for 2024, where I will actually be rounding up all of the eyeshadow palettes that I bought, purchased, and reviewed this year. So it will be talking about all of these and then those, and in that video I will just be doing a ranking, because based on this it's going to be a lot of palettes and I won't have the energy to go back and talk about, you know, why I want this palette over this palette. So we'll probably just be doing a straight up ranking, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really did, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.